after midnight on October 18th, 1985, patrolman David Mansu stopped to check on a car parked by the side of the road. Between the two occupants of the car, his flashlight beam picked up a hypodermic needle. The West Windsor, New Jersey policeman called for backup, and a chain of events began that would ultimately put dozens of lives in jeopardy.
I had begun searching the car and had, in fact, found drugs inside the car. And I alerted Patrolman Edwards that the gentleman was under arrest.
When Mansu arrested the man for possession of cocaine and a syringe, he suddenly doubled over.
He was clenching his chest severely with his arms, adamant about the fact that he was having a heart attack.
2 ambulances arrived almost immediately, with 3 volunteer emergency medical technicians and paramedic Nick Sinzak.
We got out of the vehicle, went over to assess the patient. He was extremely uncooperative at that point. He was hunched down and was very tight, wouldn't move. A friend of his who was with him at the time told my partner that he had a history of diabetes and he had been doing cocaine for a couple of days.
All right, let's go.
They stabilized the suspect for transport, and all 4 got into one ambulance with him.
At that point, I advised the driver that I would be following the ambulance in a patrol car, and if there were any problems with this individual, Mr. Lenz, to pull over, and I would attend to those problems.
While we had him in the back of the ambulance, he still was acting disoriented, confused, uncooperative, and showing signs of pretty much of how a diabetic or hypoglycemic patient would act. We had started the IV on him, and Mr. Lenz pulled the gun off. He sat down next to me on the bench, and he said, "This gun has a hollow point bullet in it. You know what that can do." At that point, I said, "Look, I have a wife, and I have 2 children that I love very much, and I'd really like to see them again." And with that, he turned and he turned the gun off of me and went after Bill. He had Bill up against the side of the ambulance, and he was screaming, "Tell the police to get back or I'll kill him." When he started to scream, "I'm going to kill him, I'm going to kill him right now," I looked up at Bill, and Bill's eyes were almost saying, "Please, I don't want to die." So that's when I got back into the ambulance.
Shoot you! Get away, cop! Come on, let's go! Run!
EMT Joan Myers was driving.
I tapped on the window, trying to indicate to her to turn the ambulance off, but she never acknowledged that.
With the lives of 4 hostages at stake, Mansu put out the call for backup.
237, I have a hostage situation here at the hospital.
I felt that I failed the victims. In fact, we were allowed to be tricked by Mr. Lenz faking the heart attack, and that we were so concerned about his well-being and his welfare that we failed to forcibly pull his arms apart.
Mansu followed the ambulance with no idea what was going on inside.
We were traveling down University Place at a speed of approximately 35 to 40 miles an hour when suddenly the rear door to the ambulance came open and a body came flying out. I was certain that Mr. Lenz had shot this individual and thrown him out the back door as some indication to us that he was serious.
Are you okay? You okay? Yeah. It's just a cut. It's not shot. It's just a cut. I'm going to continue with the ambulance. You want to take care of it? I got him.
He indicated to me that he had taken it upon himself to dive out the back of the ambulance.
I do remember looking at Bill like, "Do you want to go with me?" And I just opened the back door of the ambulance, and the next thing I know, I was getting up off the ground. The hardest thing was leaving the other people in the vehicle, because you felt like I was abandoning them.
The gunman took over the radio from Joan Myers and threatened to kill the 3 remaining hostages if the cops didn't return his cocaine and his glasses.
The reason why we stopped at Dunkin' Donuts was because he said something about being a diabetic, and he said he needed something to eat or sugar. So Billy went in, we watched him, and Michael says, "Stay right here, because I can see him." He came in the front seat, and the gun was held to my head. And I had no idea whether the safety was on or off. I didn't want to see the gun. I didn't want to know it was there.
Patrolman Mansu and Sergeant Bill Clark were also watching.
My main concern was that now we had a hostage, Bill Manuel, out of the ambulance. He was the one who was chosen to go in and make the order at Dunkin' Donuts. And that I did not want to allow him to re-enter the ambulance. Figured we had him out now, we were going to take him out. We were going to leave him out. as Bill Manuel exited the Dunkin' Donuts, I grabbed him.
Before I got out, Lenz told me to come back or else he was going to kill the other two that were in there. I told him, so I had to get back, and he says no.
Suddenly, the ambulance came around the corner. We could see that Mr. Lenz was now in the front seat, and a dialogue began between myself and Mr. Lenz. He was demanding that we give Mr. Manuel back to him.
Nobody's going to get hurt, Michael. Everything's going to be okay. Come on, just calm down.
Obviously, we could not have fired upon him because of Joan Myers' position. We were not going to put her in any more danger than she was already in.
Just calm down. We don't want to hurt anybody, Michael. Just calm down. Come on, Michael. Just calm down. Let's talk about this, Michael. Come on. Nobody's going to get hurt, Michael.
The ambulance stopped. And it appeared to me that Mr. Lenz now moved from the front of the ambulance to the rear of the ambulance. I got the attention of Joan Myers. She opened the door when I reached up and grabbed her and threw her back to Sergeant Clark. I then trained my weapon on the open doorway to the ambulance, hoping to see Mr. Lenz once again.
I think relief was almost too overwhelming, but at the same time I'm wondering, is Rory okay? Is he going to be as lucky as we are?
The last hostage, Rory Murphy, was forced into the driver's seat at gunpoint. The ambulance took off. When we continue. As the ambulance headed out of town, only one policeman kept it under close surveillance.
Suspect pulled into a development, a housing development. After he pulled in, I pulled in and turned off my lights and parked on a side street. So I just kind of like laid low for a few minutes. My car was turned off, the headlights were off, and I slumped down in the seat.
By radio, a meeting was arranged. At the suspect's insistence, it was set for a nearby McDonald's. Police Chief Joe Mashinsky and his men arrived first.
We have a bad situation here. This isn't really the place to try to resolve it. We're too close to the highway. What we got to try to do is get this. I advise our people to send Officer Funda up to the bowling alley to provide some cover. But I was going to attempt to either try to get the hostage away from the individual or do what I had to do if, the situation warranted. I'm preparing myself that if I have to shoot, that I am going to shoot.
The gunman was still insisting on the return of his cocaine, but Mashinsky convinced him to drive to the deserted parking lot of the local bowling alley, where his demands for food and liquor would be met.
Alongside the building, there's railroad ties, and I thought maybe I could get the ambulance in a position where one would have to get out and get the Jack Daniels and the roast beef. So I set them on the railroad tie, and I waited to come across. I was hoping that the ambulance driver was going to step out of the ambulance. When he did, I was just going to step in and, I was carrying a 13-shot automatic. And like I said, I also feared for my own life, so I figured the best thing to do was to open up with an automatic, and I knew I couldn't miss the guy from that distance. As he reached out, he looked down and he saw me, and I tried to whisper to him, open the door.
Don't try anything or I swear I'll blow your head off.
With his last hostage gone, the gunman took off alone in the stolen ambulance.
The vehicle is leaving out on Route 130.
At that point, all the police cars started giving pursuit. This is the first time there was actually a high-speed chase. At this point, I think speed reaches around 90 miles an hour, so I was right in the middle of the pack of, I'd say, 12 to 16 police cars. Went into the northbound lanes past the ambulance. I had to slam down my brakes to both spun off the highway.
The ambulance came to a stop in a grassy field.
Cars were sliding to a stop. I'm sliding behind them, trying not to hit the car in front of me, hoping the guy behind me doesn't hit me.
police officers trained their gun on the ambulance, waiting for something to happen.
The life-threatening situation now had really diminished. Could you really legitimately shoot this individual now if you had no hostage?
It was a standoff. They decided to try another way. 20-year veteran Lieutenant Dan Rogers, due to retire in less than a year, was called in as a negotiator.
I felt some danger because you don't really know who you're dealing with when you first get called out. Anything could go wrong. I mean, he could just raise a gun in my face at any point and, blow me away because of his dark. I couldn't see everything inside there. It was like talking to somebody when you talk to a priest with the screen there. It was something like that. Didn't have that good of visibility.
Hey, put the gun down now. Nobody's here to hurt you. I don't even have a gun. Look, I'm not even armed.
Lens was starting to come off his high, apparently.
He was claiming that he would kill himself if we attempted to get inside the ambulance.
Michael, it's David. Can you hear me?
In answer to the gunman's demands, his ex-wife was brought to the scene.
Yeah, please come out. They said nobody was hurt here. Nobody else outside was hurt. And they just want to help you.
You know, you're starting to sound like one of them.
Michael, nobody's telling me what to say. You say whatever you want.
You say what you want. Why don't you come over here and talk to me?
If you throw the gun out, I will.
You know better than that. Dean. I'm sorry they dragged you over here. I was brought, lady. But, I'm gonna go. Because you don't want to talk to me. I ain't gonna play their game. I asked them for something.
We didn't let it talk to him too long. He wasn't making any headway. But it did establish the fact that we were trying to help him and trying to get him out safely, and I think he realized that.
Around 8 the next morning, Rogers was still trying to talk the gunman into surrendering his weapon.
Tell me if I brought your wife out, you give me the gun and come out, pal.
When I was a young cop, we believed in charging it, breaking a door down and taking everybody out forcibly. And over the years, you learn sometimes negotiation's the better way to do it. Most people want a way out, I think.
All right, now let's go.
He handed the gun to me in pieces, just handed it through the window to me, opened the door, came out, and he went into my arms and just hugged me. To tell you the truth, when the guy came out, he didn't look dangerous to me. I just really thought just some poor soul that got juiced up on drugs and he didn't know what he was doing. He was just reaching out for something, whether it was help, I really don't know.
When he was lucid, he didn't want to hurt me. He considered me a nice guy. When he wasn't lucid, as I said, he was going to blow my brains out.
My wife was really upset. I remember coming home and just holding on to her. Just holding on to her. It was a long night, but I can remember when it was all over with. I think it was great. Not only did we get hostages out unhurt, but to get the suspect and get him uninjured, that made it 100% successful. When I was done, I felt real good about it, and I think all the other officers did too.
Less than 8 hours after it began, the incident was over. The gunman was convicted of kidnapping and possession of a weapon and narcotics. He was sentenced to 24 years in prison. All of the 4 former hostages have returned to their field work in emergency medicine.